Bonjour, I am Elodie from Elodie Through My Lens, and this is a new freebie for you guys. So as spring is coming back in Canada, I wanted to create a double exposure with a mix of flowers and wildlife. If you know me, you know that I specialize in nature photography, mainly in wildlife photography as well as creative photography. If you want to know more about wildlife photography, I have an intro to wildlife photography course and also an essential guide for hummingbird photography. And if you want to get more creative with your photography, whatever your photography genre is, I have a creative light and shadows course. I also have a chasing light in winter course, as well as finding your own photography voice guide. So yeah, that's it. Now let's talk about the image I created. So I did an horizontal version as well as a real ratio version. The flowers are crocuses from my garden from a few springs ago. This is the raw image and this is the edited version. So here I didn't use reverse free lensing to capture it. Usually with flower I like to use my 50mm lens in reverse free lensing, but here I just use my 150-600mm lens, and you can see here that I was at 600mm. Now for the hummingbird image, this is the raw image and this is the edited version. This hummingbird is called a violet saber wing. I love them personally, they are quite incredible. And you can see here that the raw image is underexposed, and I use the exposure compensation technique to underexpose and keep the details in the shadows. And I also use a technique called the back button to focus on the hummingbird. All the techniques that I am going to talk about in this freebie are explained across my different courses and guides. And let me show you some of footage of this gorgeous hummingbird that I took also while I was photographing them, and see how amazing they are.
So here is my raw image, which is underexposed, as you can see on the histogram here. Let's bump up the exposure. I am going to lift up the shadows because the hummingbird is a bit dark, but I don't like the fact that the shadows are lifting on the whole image. I'd like to keep the background dark. What I want is to have only the shadows lifted on the hummingbird, so I am going to use a radial filter to lift up the shadows only on the hummingbird. Now I'm going to add a bit of texture and clarity. You can see that I have a lot of grain here in my image as it was taken at ISO 3200. Usually for this type of images, I take my images through Topaz AI, but here I am doing a double exposure, so I'm going to embrace grain and texture. If it was only a wildlife hummingbird image, I would definitely go through Topaz as I print my images and I want them to be without grain. So I'm going to add a little bit of vibrancy and I'd like to desaturate the greens too. So let's do that. I am going to reduce the grain by using luminance and masking in the detail panel. So I drag the luminance to 50, and by pressing the Alt key on my keyboard while moving the cursor for the masking, the image becomes black and white. The white is where the grain will stay mostly, and the black it's going to be decreased. But you can see here at ISO 3200, this is not enough to get rid of all the grain, but it's okay for my creative purpose today. Now I am bringing my image into Photoshop.
So let's just pause for a few seconds here, and this is very important. I am showing you how I create and how I edit my images to align with the vision I have in my mind, but this is my vision, okay? And it's really important that you find what vision you have when you edit, what your voice is in photography, and what makes your images you. You know, how people recognize your images and directly know that they are your images. So photography voice is a complex concept, and I invite you to think about your own photography voice as I edit in the next minutes. So yeah, let's go back to the edit.
And I am extending the canvas of my image, choosing content aware. For this little spot, I don't like what the content aware did, so I am going to pick a nearby color with the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to paint with the brush to correct this section. Now I am applying a high pass filter to increase sharpness on the hummingbird, and I use masking to put this sharpness only on the hummingbird. Now I want to go back to Lightroom and do a few adjustments. I want the hummingbird to be brighter, so I'm going to use a brush to add exposure and lower the shadows and the black to get more contrast. I could have done that in Photoshop too. I'm not happy with the greens here, they're a bit too vibrant for me, so I am going to decrease the saturation again for the greens. Okay, now I want to make my bird pop out a bit more, and one way to do it is to put more light on the bird than the background or the surroundings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to underexpose the whole image and then use a radial filter to increase the exposure around on the bird and around it. Okay, so I like the final look, and I'm going to leave the hummingbird like that, and now I'm going to work on the flowers. This is already the edited version of the flowers, and here they have a beautiful vibrant purple that I love, but it doesn't match the purple of the hummingbird. So what I'm going to do is to change the purple of the flowers to make them match more the purple of the hummingbird. So I am playing with the HSL Hue Saturation Luminance panel to make the best match possible. I don't need them to match exactly, but I still want to have them to have the same vibe, if you see what I mean. So now they are ready to be fused for the double exposure. So I am bringing both images into Photoshop. You see that the flower image doesn't have the same ratio, so I am going to extend the canvas for this one. And then I am going to use the blending overlay and the transformation tool, pressing Command and T on my keyboard at the same time. And with that transformation tool, I can adapt the images until I am satisfied with the final look. Here again, I am going to use the content aware to extend the canvas. You can see that this little section here is not perfect, so I'm going back into the normal mode, correcting this and putting back the overlay blending mode. I really like the golden plants and the bouquet that are in front of the crocuses. So I'm going to duplicate the flower image and use this part of the image to frame a little bit more the hummingbird on the left side. What I want is the people eyes to go from the top left corner of the image going down on the crocuses and their eyes coming up on the hummingbird. And so the last thing they're going to look at is the hummingbird, and hopefully their eyes are going to stay here and stay in the image because the hummingbird is my main subject here. I am going to add a little bit of magic sparkling dust, and these overlays are from Oli Awad, and I like to use them to add a touch of magic. I am going to use a second overlay. And also decrease the opacity to make it blend more naturally. I think my image is overall a bit too bright, so I'm going to duplicate my hummingbird image under and decrease the exposure just on this layer. I am going to fine-tune this, playing with the opacity of this layer just to match how dark I want the final image to be. And I am bringing back the image into Lightroom. In Lightroom, I am going to add a little bit of contrast, playing again with shadows and blacks. Now, as a final touch, I am going to add a lightscaping overlay. Usually, I also check gamut on the image. I think there is some gamut here to be corrected for the purple on the hummingbird. But I am not going to print this image, so I'll leave it like this. So this is my final image, and to recap, I had first my crocuses image before and after editing, and my hummingbird image before and after editing. And this is the final horizontal image. And I also created a real ratio image, as I told you before, that I'm going to use on social medias. To create this image, I basically used the same techniques that we just saw. Try to frame the hummingbird with several patches of crocuses. Just for fun, I am going to show you how I use Adobe Color. So I am putting this final edit into Adobe Color, which is a website. It's a free website, and you can see here on the chromatic wheel where the colors are. And I could make changes so the orange part of the images are more yellow to make complementary colors with the purple. You know, yellow and purple are complementary colors. But right now I really like how the orange part is, so I'm going to leave it like that. But this is something you can keep in mind to play with complementary colors, analogous colors, or split complementary colors. It's the same thing that I showed you before in the hue, saturation, and luminance panel. You can play and fine-tune exactly how you want the color to be able to match if you want to do, like, for instance, complementary colors.
Thank you so much for watching this freebie, and don't hesitate to check out my courses to know more. Bye bye, au revoir!
I hope that you enjoyed the editing, and also I hope that this ignited a sparkle for you in your heart for nature photography, wildlife photography, creative editing, and that it also made you think about what your own photography voice is and how you want to shape it.